thank you, Joe, for this, for your valuable time. I think in the audience, there's a lot of entrepreneurs very eager to learn from you and hear about your insights throughout the tough challenges that you have faced throughout these years. And so without further ado, I'll dive directly into the first questions. So I think the major topic I think everybody's concerned here is about the current situation with the COVID-19, how it has impacted the entire world, and so on to the economy and the businesses. And you have successfully come out through different situations with SARS as well, and now with COVID-19. But I think the questions I would like to ask you is about the learnings throughout your entrepreneurship journey, throughout these situations, and what advices would you give to these business owners? Because there's a few startups that are kind of lucky, they were able to get past with this, but a lot more businesses, even startups or traditional business, they're not that lucky. So what advices you have to give them so that they can get through this?
Now, I just have a little story about back then, the SARS story. We never wavered from our focus on the customers. In fact, when we learned that one of our own colleagues back in Hangzhou could possibly be subject to quarantine, which means that the whole company had to be in quarantine, we started to make preparations to move our computers home. Back then, everybody still operated on the desktop computer with a large screen, no mobile phones, right? So we were lugging all of our equipment home. Why? Because we wanted to make sure that when the customers email us or call us, that we were able to serve them. So our entire customer service operation continued to operate during the whole process. So I think fast forward to today, being focused on the customer is an absolute priority. Obviously, the first thing is you want to make sure that your employees, your people are safe, and that they are in conditions where they could continue to function, and if that could be done, then they could continue to serve the customers. Look, there are a lot of I know that with the shutdown, like if you're in, let's say, the restaurant business and your restaurant had to shut down, there's nothing that you can do about it. But I think a lot of companies nowadays are thinking about alternative ways. Just because the restaurant shut down doesn't mean that your customers stop eating. So then they do takeout, right? Yeah. So adaptability of the business is very, very important. And I just think that right now also, beyond serving the customers, you have to think inward. How is your operation going to change? So a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of CEOs that have teams are starting to think about whether they should all go back in the office, or whether they can do a combination of work from home. In fact, what I have learned personally is that colleagues can actually get closer together, even though they're distanced apart, working from home. And the reason is we now don't think twice about jumping on a call on Ding Ding or Zoom or whatever video chat tool. So your frequency of touches with your employee, even in a virtual way, has actually increased. So there's actually you develop a closer bond with your colleagues in a strange way, in a virtual way. So these are all things that you could take advantage of. And I think the usage of video calls will definitely go up. People are no longer going to be shy about connecting, showing their face, showing the background of their homes. Nobody would mind that very much anymore. So I think that's a good thing. Over time, this is a permanent change because of COVID.
And I think the other part or key problems, or I think something very important is co-founders in entrepreneurship. I mean, like co-founders are essential, and having a good working relationship within your co-founder is very important. I myself are very lucky to have my co-founder Fiona, and we separate our roles very clearly, and we form a good tandem. But I think we couldn't get there from day one. I think there's been a lot of struggles, there's been a lot of down phases and challenges to get through there. And I think that co-founder relationship is something similar to marriage, in a way. You have arguments and you go through things that will make your bond grow stronger. And I think, and here I would like to ask you, because everybody knows that you have a strong relationship and a very successful relationship with Jack Ma. So how do you maintain this relationship throughout so many years? And not only with Jack Ma, but also with other 16 co-founders that you have through the beginning of when you guys started Alibaba. And so how do you maintain this relationship, and any advice that you have for us when we have co-founder issues or arguments with our co-founders?
So Jack and I have been very lucky in that we're very, very different people. We sort of come from the two opposite ends of the extreme in terms of personality, temperament, and skill sets. So from day one, we kind of recognize that I look at Jack and I say, he has so many skills and talents that I don't have, because he can just go up there and communicate really well. In terms of talking about a vision of the company, getting employees inspired, he's the best, right? And I can't do that. I'm not naturally a very good speaker publicly. And then there are aspects that Jack would say to me that, hey, look, Joe, you understand, let's say, setting up a legal structure, the finance aspects. I don't know anything about it, but I will rely on you, Joe, to do it. So from day one, we know what we're good at, sort of, with each other. And like you said, just like a marriage, you kind of have division of responsibility. And if you can work out with your spouse, certain decisions, you can go ahead and just take those decisions. Other decisions, you let your spouse take it and not sort of step on each other's toes. I think that's really the best relationship. So I've been very, very fortunate that from day one we had that relationship. The other thing is just having respect for each other. I've always had a lot of respect for Jack. Jack always had respect for me, but it doesn't mean that sometimes he could joke with me, and even in a meeting with colleagues, he'll kind of say something funny about me as a joke or things like that, and you never take it personally. You always know that it is because it's because he really trusts you. That means if he's like always very respectful in public, in private, and everything, then there's a problem. Then you have a trust issue. It's only because you trust each other either so much you can actually like laugh at each other, right? Even in front of other people. So that's the relationship I have with Jack. So we've been very, very lucky.
I mean, as an entrepreneur and business owner, you face many great challenges. I mean, in what we say, you must have failed a lot of times before you get it right. And with these challenges, each one of them will be even more difficult than the previous one because of different phases. Yeah. Which was the major challenge that you would describe that marked yourself, that it has given you the greatest impact to yourself personally?
I think the biggest challenge when you, as an entrepreneur growing a business, I'm sure you face the same challenge too, is identifying the right people and put them in the right place to do the right things. Yeah. So people is always the biggest challenge. And it's the most rewarding too, because if you get it right and you say, yes, I knew so-and-so, if I put him in as head of marketing or as head of engineering, things will work. And things work out, it's the most rewarding thing. So the learning here is, as an entrepreneur, is you want to be very focused on people. Recruiting, once they come in, how they land in the company, to make sure that they buy into the company culture, as well as developing them. You have to continuously develop them so that they're more valuable every year, to your business. I think these are the biggest challenges of being an entrepreneur. I think when you first start, for the first 6 months, you're trying to get your product ready or setting up a company or opening bank accounts and things like that. None of them involve people, but as you scale your business, the bigger your business gets, the more time you should be spending on the people.
Gotcha. I mean, I think for startups we face a lot of issues with people. It's always, there's always a saying, it's always about the people. The people make the team, and the team is what get the company
right
to where you are right now. But the other thing that I would like to ask you about entrepreneurs and startups shifting their strategy, it's about fundraising kind of thing. Like startups previously have different plans throughout different years, and fundraisings are planned ahead sometimes. And some startups are very lucky. I was very lucky in many different ways to have being invested by you guys, and even the recent round that we were able to close right exactly before COVID-19 started. Was super lucky. But there's actually quite a lot of startups that didn't make it through the COVID-19, and even they're struggling right now. And in this scenario, this kind of startups are losing their runway, and they're shifting their strategies, and they're trying to fundraise in many different ways, but they have a lower hand on the negotiation. So what's your advice to these startups and how to negotiate when you have the lower hand in this current situation?
Well, you could definitely change your fortunes by maybe turning your bad hand into a not so bad hand, or maybe into a good hand, which is by looking inward to your business to see what you can improve, to present your business in a substantive way, not just to show, but to present business better to investors. So, for example, your fundamental business model should be intact, even if customers have slowed down, and if you can continue to show that you have a way to get to positive unit economics, right? So if you're selling something, let's say on e-commerce, and your customer acquisition cost is so high that you don't have unit economics, every time you sell an item, you're losing money in terms of negative gross margin. I would say that's a model that will never be able to help you raise money. So looking at the fundamentals of your business, showing that the unit economics is could turn positive with a specific plan, that's going to be very, very compelling to the potential investors. Now, the interesting thing is that in the current environment, the interest rates are very, very low. That's actually favorable to companies that want to issue stock, because investors, when they value a business just based on a simple discounted cash flow model, they will care less about your current earnings or cash flow, as long as they believe that, let's say, 5 years or 7 years from now, you will have positive cash flow and you will have good growth over a longer period of time. For those CFOs that are listening to this call, it's a discounted cash flow model, and your terminal value of the discounted cash flow model, if you show high growth beyond the terminal value, beyond the terminal year, that means you'll have a very high terminal value. When discounted to present value, it's actually worth a lot. So how can you tune your business so that you can show unit economics viability and high growth, maybe not necessarily in the next 12 months, but over 3, 5, 7 years, will continue to grow. Those are characteristics that will be attractive to investors, and then you turn your bad hand into a good hand. The other advice I would make to entrepreneurs raising money is, I think sometimes entrepreneurs care too much about valuation. And of course valuation matters, because if you sell your company too cheap, it's too dilutive to the founders, and you want to manage that dilution. But if dilution is not a huge issue for you, then don't raise money on high valuations just because of pride or ego, because you'll end up disappointing your investors.
Mm-hmm.
You always want your investors to be able to make money and be happy.
Yeah.
For those that are, for example, going public, going into raising money in the public market, in a public company context, depending on which market you're listing, you're not selling the whole company. You're selling maybe 10%, 15%, 25% of your equity. That's the level of dilution. So if you try to push the valuation too high, it's not worth it, because then investors buy your stock, they lose money, then they would just leave. They will always leave bad taste in their mouth.
Gotcha.
So the balance between dilution and just meeting investor expectations and leaving a little bit of money on the table. Alibaba has always been, in our financing history, we've always left money on the table. All of our investors, with no exception, have all made money with us over the history of 20 years. And I think that's a winning formula.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, those are great insights. And I think I want to add on a question on that, because I think entrepreneurs, as a founders, entrepreneurs, the dilution is a very important topic when fundraising. I think, as you mentioned, a lot of founders will get hung up on that valuation value, and if it's too low, they might not take it due to pride or not. I think besides the pride part or the money-making part, one thing that founders have encountered difficulties is in control of the company, or keeping that power to continue to push the company forward. And I think that comes into the relationship with investors, that once you get diluted too much, over 50 or 60 or 80% of the company, then how can you keep control of the company, or have at least a say in the direction of the company, even through board or through stock?
So if you look at a lot of the successful entrepreneurial-led companies, the founders don't have absolute control. A lot of companies that are listed today do not have a dual-class stock structure. And here's the thing. Control becomes important, or your fight with the investors become important only if something goes wrong. If everything goes right, then investors are not going to care about control. They're going to leave you alone. So let's put all the energy into making things right. Like I said, focusing on the customers, focusing on that you have a positive unit economics business model, and also focusing on a level of communication and transparency with your shareholders. Shareholders really do not like to be surprised. So when you communicate with your board and your investors, the most important thing is to give them the level of transparency so they see the good things and also the bad things. When you show them the bad things, be very upfront and say, here are the problems, but here's my solution to solve the problems. And watch me, because over the next 12 months, 24 months, I will solve these problems and have a plan. And investors will then appreciate it. All right. So if you try to hide problems, then it's always too late when when they find out, and then they think you've been not trustworthy, and then they want to get rid of you. Now, about the 18 founders in the company, I want to say something it's very, very unique about Alibaba, because we have so many founders. The founders are very influential when it comes to promoting the culture of the company. When a company scales up, if you only have maybe 100 people, that cultural problem is not there. But as you scale up to, let's say, 500, 1,000, 2,000 people, then the culture could be diluted. Whatever you think are important values and the DNA of the company could become diluted. So guess what? Having 18 founders is a huge advantage, because the founders have so many more touches with employees. So every time they come across a meeting or a business line or something, maybe they get to work with a founder, and the founders lead by example, the kind of values that they espouse. So if you have a common mission for the company, having lots of founders is great because they're out there evangelizing your mission for you. So that's the advantage of Alibaba with 18 founders.
Wow, I see a lot of analogies in here, and then I'm very lucky because me and my co-founder Fiona were actually similar in a way that we're the exact same opposite to each other. We have different skill set, and I think we can see the analogy in here with Jack, which I'm very fortunate to have that. And I think going back to one of the questions that you said about the culture of the company and how it might get diluted along the way, but you have the founders in there to help you maintain it. But when Alibaba was going through many different phases of growth, the company obviously evolved with it. Have you seen, or how do I put this, would the culture would evolve along the way to adapt to the needs of the ever-growing company? Because when you're a small company, you would do things in a different way. But when you're 1,000 people, 2,000, 10,000 people, you will have to do things differently to continue to grow. And when you go into become an international company, when more cultures are stepping in, that is not only one specific regional culture, then would that evolve to adapt?
Well, first, let me define what culture is. I want to be a little bit precise on this because at Alibaba we have a very clear view of what culture is about. I think some companies will say, our culture is very hardworking, everybody work very hard at night. That's a culture, that's great. At Alibaba, culture means first that you have a mission. Like there's a reason for the company to exist other than just making profits. Second, you establish a vision for the future. What do you want the company to be? Where do you want the company to be? And these could be like 5-year, 10-year targets for the company as a vision. The third thing is values. What values do you live by? How do you want your employees to live, both in and outside the office? And these three things at Alibaba form our culture. Our mission is to make it easy to do business anywhere. Okay, that's because Alibaba was founded as a B2B marketplace for SMEs, and for SMEs to come make it easy for them to do business. So very much embedded in our DNA is the idea of helping the little guy. That's very much in our DNA, and that's why Jack, his famous author is Jin Yong. The 武侠小说, the 侠义 culture is all about 打抱不平, right? Helping the little guy, getting rid of evil in the world. That's kind of the very much of the culture, and to this day we still have that same mission to make it easy to do business anywhere. And again, to this day our focus is still on the SME. Right? It's been 20 plus years. The vision of the company can evolve over time. When we were first started 20 years ago, we said we want to be one of the top 10 websites in the world. Back then we were still thinking about websites. Now we're thinking about apps. Now we've attained sort of that goal. We're one of the world's largest internet companies. So we have now set a broader mission. What we have said is by 2036, and the reason 2036 is we kind of redid our mission, our vision, 4 years ago in 2016, on a 20-year trajectory. Right? You set kind of a 20-year trajectory. We want to serve 2 billion consumers in the world. We want to help 10 million profitable SMEs to do business profitably on our platform, and we want to create 100 million jobs. So these are like very sizable targets, and it gives people a view as to where we want to be over the next 20 years. And then we have values, things like customer first, integrity. We always say at Alibaba, the only thing that's constant is change. We used to say embrace change. These are some of the examples of some of the ethos. And what do the values do? They tell us how we behave, both to the colleagues, to our customers in the office and also outside of the office. You know, I think these are some of the things that you are, as the company evolves, you want to write them down. What do they really mean? And then you actually, the founders should sit together and debate it, should talk about it, to really figure out what it means, and then find a way to communicate to your employees, and then have your employees live all of those values in every day. So at Alibaba, for example, we actually have our quarterly and annual evaluation process that will evaluate whether you are adhering to our values or not. So this is actually a rigorous process for rating people on their values. And you know, so you have to implement it through a process. So it's not just talk. It's implementation. It's operations. It's action.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's very amazing to hear that you guys were able to create a culture at the very beginning, and still up to 20 years, it's still the same one. And I hope that everyone in the audience, and myself included, could have that opportunity to continue to over this 20 years as well.